You're right.
When you think of the miners' strikes of 1984, what do you see? Picket lines, violence, police confrontation, and the opposing figures of Scargill and Thatcher.
Discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope.
Of course, the conflict between the National Union of Miners and Thatcher didn't just take place upon the picket lines. You see, the kitchens in mining communities would serve to be just as vital a battleground as any.
Our duty demands and the national interest requires that we see that violence does not pay and is seen not to pay.
Limiting access to food was a key strategy in Thatcher's battle against the National Union of Mine Workers. A 1980 Government Act removed the benefit rights for single strikers, and during the 84 strike, family benefits were cut by £15. A social worker in Fife warned that miners' wives and children were being expected to live below the poverty line. A local councillor had an even darker view of the government's intentions. It's an unofficially declared war, and they are going to try and starve them out. The threat of food poverty forced mining communities to be more self-dependent than ever. Future Prime Minister Gordon Brown warned that the government had shifted the relief of poverty from the Social Security Office to the soup kitchen. In Fife communities such as Lochgelly, soup kitchens were established exclusively to feed striking men. Of course, the women would want these to act as community hubs, not just feeding the men, but the families. But of course, they didn't just want the food, they wanted the funding. In Loch Orth, the Women's Committee specifically set up things like jumble sales, raffle tickets, and even bingo nights to try and get the families fed. But with so many mouths to feed and so little money to spend, creative recipes were essential.
In times of hardship, there are few meals quite as comforting as a stovey. According to one origin story, the meal was introduced by 19th century servants who were so kindly permitted to eat their master's Sunday leftovers. Though the stovey has always been associated with simplicity, we're going to show you a version which minimizes time and expense. Instead of leftover roast meat, we'll use corned beef, a protein all too familiar to striking communities dependent on food parcels.
It didn't happen over pit closures in Wales, and it didn't happen over a closure in Scotland. So what's different this time? The answer lies in the pit where the strike started, at a South Yorkshire colliery called Corton Wood. On March the 1st, the coal board announced the pit would close in 5 weeks' time. There was coal left underground, 5 years' supply, but the coal board said it was too dear to mine.
Though the strike had rallied the Scottish mining community together, the NUM's defeat in 85 brought about the fragmentation and decline in Scotland. Of the 206 miners convicted of strike-related offences, only 80 would then be rehired by the coal board. Those who remained sacked would lose access to their pensions and would struggle to find employment, as they'd often be blacklisted by suspicious employers, despite the fact that many of these men were strong, ardent community leaders. Men like Ronnie Campbell, chair of the Loch Orr Strike Committee, who, despite his best efforts, remained unemployed for over a decade. But it wasn't just striking miners who would face the consequences. After the initial strikes, Thatcher's government increased the rate to which the pits were closed. For example, in East Fife, employment levels went from 80.3% in 1981 to 66.4% in 1991. They said at the time, close a pit, kill a community. Something which feels oddly prophetic, given the circumstances.
Now there's a double irony. The pit has run into the red, the comprehensives run out of pupils. Both face closure.
The defeat of the National Union of Mine Workers and the ever-diminishing role of state-owned energy companies really fed into Thatcher's support for popular capitalism. Now, popular capitalism doesn't just view the individual as a consumer, but also as an investor.
A little drop of history. And the start of a massive ESSO investment program that helps keep the economy moving. We're spending £1 million a day with British suppliers. We've laid the foundations for a new petrochemical industry in Scotland.
Historian Amy Edwards has argued that by linking everyday consumption to capital ownership, Thatcher's economic revolution was given the appearance of being ordinary. As the world of finance and stocks and shares entered the everyday culture of the 1980s and consequently encouraged the individual to assume personal responsibility for financial decisions. Outside the party conferences and parliamentary sessions, the individualistic vision was amplified through pop culture. Hit TV shows such as Howard's Way and Dallas portrayed wealth, ambition and the irresistibly cutthroat world of business to millions.
This is all going to be plain sailing, isn't it?
Far from it. She intends to take me for every penny she can get, California style.
Good grief, that could be half your entire estate.
But of course, there were attempts to modernise these new mining communities, to have them thrust into the world of enterprise. The National Coal Board, or as it would be rebranded in 1987 as British Coal, sought to do this very task through their British Coal Enterprises Division. It aimed to bring enterprise culture to the former mining communities through investment in business ventures and job retraining schemes.
Black olives, smoked cheese, black rye bread, low-fat black pudding.
Though this recipe is tongue-in-cheek, it does offer a glimpse into the cultural values championed by Thatcherism.
And Guinness.
Before the 1980s, black olives and black grapes were relatively pricey commodities and certainly wouldn't have been common items in working-class kitchen. In the 80s, these formerly middle-class commodities became associated with social mobility. They were culinary symbols for the prosperity all could supposedly obtain through hard work and independence. They shed a little bit of light on the gap between Thatcherite cultural values and the miners' reality. Dick Emery, the UDM South Derbyshire General Secretary, described the interview as a bit of fun and Edwina Curry a good sport. However, he also noted that though the menu sounded nice, he thought that some top Tories would have us miners eating bread and lard.
That last comment hits particularly hard at the anxiety felt by the UDM. Admittedly, the UDM always maintained quite cordial relationships with the Conservative government, though they'd be once again placed in a very precarious position. You see, John Major's government introduced yet another sweep of pit closures, especially those in the Nottinghamshire area. And so those UDM workers that continued working all the way through the initial strikes felt betrayed by their government, as now their communities would feel the same economic and social hardship as was felt by the initial striking families in '85. And for those pits that did survive the closure, their new owners would abandon all recognition of the unions. And so the prosperity and financial fortitude offered by the 80s would now feel distant and out of grasp once more.